Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. President Cyil Ramaphosa is set to address the nation at 8 o'clock tonight. He's expected to outline government's plans that will be implemented to address the recommendations of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry on state capture allegations, corruption and fraud in the public sector and state-owned entities. For more on this, we're joined by Qaanitah Hunter, politics editor at News24. A very good afternoon to you, Qaanitah. Thank you so much for your time. President Ramaphosa addresses the nation this evening as three former presidents, Jacob Zuma, Thabo Mbeki and Kgalema Motlanthe, have publicly criticized his leadership. So much so that the ANC in KZN has hit out at the leaders, describing the utterances as a strange occurrence. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a difficult weekend for President Cyil Ramaphosa, him coming under attack by, like you said, three former presidents of the ANC. With one, Kgalema Motlanthe saying South Africa is at the precipice. You had former President Thabo Mbeki talking directly to the Phala investigation that the president is facing, saying what happens should the independent panel that has been appointed by the Speaker of Parliament find that he has an impeachable case to answer sometime in November when the ANC conference is in December. And then we obviously heard from former President Jacob Zuma accusing Cyil Ramaphosa of treason. You had today EFF leader Julius Malema also lash out at President Cyil Ramaphosa in relation to the accusations he's been facing around Phala. Now, the president has been tight-lipped ever since the accusations were made against him, despite the various probes, the public protector probe, the probe by South African Reserve Bank, and obviously Parliament asking him these questions. He consistently says that the money that was stolen from his farm at Phala was the proceeds of a sale of game, and that's what he told the public protector, and insists that he has done nothing wrong. Now, that is the cloud that hangs over the president's head when he has to address the nation on another set of impropriety, and that is around state capture. The public protector report that was released in 2016 said that once this commission of inquiry that was recommended be set up and concluded, the president will have to tell Parliament what it plans to do to implement this report. Obviously, it's been so many years. It's been, thousands and thousands of pages that the president had to go through, the president's team had to go through and come up with an implementable plan. The deadline for it was midnight last night, where he had to present Parliament with a plan to say, this is how I'm going to implement the State Capture Commission of Inquiry report that was given to him by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. It is a 76-page report that he has now given to Parliament. It's interesting to see what is contained in that report, given the fact that the report itself was so voluminous.
Yeah. With this report, I would imagine that constitutional compliance will need to be something President Ramaphosa needs to be very conscious of when he responds to the recommendations this evening, especially as the future trajectory of South Africa is really at stake.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how he responds to some of the findings made in that report. For example, there's some findings about the changing of how we elect a president, for example. The findings that were made around cadre deployment, and we know Ramaphosa in court has contradicted Zondo on this particular matter. There's also recommendations around particular cabinet ministers that the president will have to take action to. One hopes that this is a thorough response, because that's what the president responded. Every time he received a version or a copy of a part of the Zondo report, he said he was not going to comment until he received the entire report, which he has received. And we know that President Cyil Ramaphosa has been implicated in the report. In the last version, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo was extremely critical of President Cyil Ramaphosa in his position as Deputy President of the country. And so these 76 pages is going to be critical to see how meaningful this commission actually was, whether or not it was worth the money to spend, because whether there will be any actionable plan that is implemented after we've now gotten all of these horrible details of what happened during the state capture years. I just have to say, Mpho, that it is quite concerning that the president is not taking questions and seeking accountability in terms of this plan that he is presenting to Parliament. This is a president who himself is implicated by this report. Obviously, the Judicial Commission of Inquiry was open to the public. And if the president has a plan, we need to scrutinize the plan and ask him the tough questions. Why were certain decisions made? Why were certain things omitted, if at all? And so yet the president will be addressing the nation in what has become the famed family meeting scenario with no follow-up in terms of the media putting questions to him in relation to his plan to implement the Zondo report.
Yes, I suppose also some of the most critical areas that will attract the most attention and require thoughtful formulation of government's response revolve around reform. I mean, the reform of the criminal justice administration to make it fit to prevent state capture from reoccurring. I mean, that in itself, I think, will be one of the things that stands out.
Absolutely. And I think that, the more critical thing is his members of his executive that have been implicated. The president, has shied away from that question for a very long time in terms of what would happen to people like, for example, Zizi Kodwa, who have very specific findings against them and questions by that Zondo commission about how he was appointed to the executive anyways, given the allegations that hung over his head. There's also, concerns around legislative changes. So what is the president going to do in terms of cabinet spearheading changes to the law to reform certain or to tighten certain laws to avoid a scenario of repetition of state capture? And so one would think there's a lot that the president will have to respond to. One hopes that it is not a scarce plan, that it actually, gives the recommendations that the report presents due consideration, and perhaps even an implementable plan with some time frames to say this is what's going to happen, this is how long it's going to take.
Yeah. You made mention of EFF leader Julius Malema. I mean, we know that this afternoon he said that the country is on autopilot and the whereabouts of the pilot are unknown. You yourself a few days ago wrote an article asking if President Cyil Ramaphosa is quiet quitting. You asked whether he's taking part in the global trend and stepping quietly out of his responsibilities as you reflected on his enthusiasm or lack thereof during the last few months. What scenarios did you consider?
Yeah, it was just a point, to make around the president basically just doing the bare minimum. Because if you listen to concerns from civil society, if you listen to concerns from business, labor, the media and ordinary public, there is this growing notion that the president is not doing enough to deal with the ongoing crisis facing the country and that he's just sort of ticking boxes. And the example that I cited this week was about the ministerial handbook and the perks given to ministers, where the president chaired the cabinet meeting in April where the decision was taken. That was against his own commitment in 2019 not to increase the perks for his cabinet, basically in a time where such economic devastation plagues all South Africans. Ministers would go from paying 5,000 Rand a month, maximum 5,000 Rand a month for electricity and water at their official residence to paying absolutely nothing, where their staff complements are increasing the cost of 86 million Rand minimum for ordinary South Africans. And this is on top of the fat perks they already enjoy. And so the question is, the president has then came out to say, okay, we're going to review this. He's listened to the outrage. But the point that I was making is that the president would have known when he approved this decision in April that it would cause public outrage. And so one can take that as an example. Another example could be the vacancies that are in the executive. And so there's been a sort of growing chorus about the president sort of skirting around big decisions and even smaller ones, mundane things that could be sorted out. Why is there nothing done about the impasse around the vacancies in DGs? In the DGs, for example, we know the cabinet just appointed one DG this week, but there's so many other departments that are without permanent heads. And so the wheel of government takes very slow to turn under President Cyil Ramaphosa. The question is why? The benefit of the doubt is that it's not incompetence. So is it a case of the lack of political will, or is there a case that the president is just sort of disinterested. And that was the argument that I was making in my column this week. And I raised the point that it is very worrying to have a president that sort of has one foot in and one foot out. And I make the case that in a typical scenario, a president who's not focused on the state would be focused, on things going on in his party ahead of the conference. But if you look deeply within what's going on in the party, the president seems absent to the ongoing shenanigans in the factionalism that's playing in the ANC, to the point that there's so much of disorganization even within his supporters, which seem to be the majority.
Very
and
well.
I think also, just one last point to make, if we discount former President Jacob Zuma, who one can argue probably has personal axe to grind against President Cyil Ramaphosa, but if we listen to President Motlanthe and President Thabo Mbeki, you hear former leaders worried about a president who is not grasping the full extent of the crisis at play and the crisis at hand. And so that is at the heart of the criticism that he is facing, to say you are there, you are the president, and South Africa is going through huge challenges. Are you appreciating the crisis and doing what needs to be done in this moment?
Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in there. Politics editor at News24 Qaanitah Hunter, speaking ahead of President Cyil Ramaphosa addressing the nation at 8 o'clock this evening on the recommendations of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry.